I've been in California for 3 years. Prior to this, I was in Georgia as the state grazing land specialist. So we are kindred spirits in some degree, right? But how many of you are west of the Mississippi people in here? Yeah, almost everybody. So it's a different world in Georgia, grazing lands. Let's see. Before I came to NRCS in 2006, I guess I was at a university in East Texas for a while doing agronomy, teaching, and research, and running the soil lab. And before that, I was employed for a major oil company doing that. So if you count me going from a grazing specialist to agronomist, this is my 5th career, and so I'm still trying to figure it out. I've got time for a few more maybe. So this topic, and as I was trying to think of the title, and based upon what Sid wanted, I thought he wanted me to discuss. And you look on Google, because that's where I get all of my good information, and you find things like integrative thinking or effective thinking, and all these people that think about thinking are out there redefining critical thinking. And critical thinking, if you were in school, and we were all in school, and it's the challenge that most university professors say they want to impart to their students. They want them to come out of university being critical thinkers, but it's usually the thing that doesn't really happen because we don't know how to do that. Really, how to impart critical thinking skills. I mean, there's some techniques and ways of challenging people the way they think. But anyway, so nonetheless, I thought maybe the best title for this is Thinking Clearly. So this is different, as Sid alluded to. This is different than all the technical, data-driven stuff. I got to listen to Dr. Derner. That was really awesome, his presentation on all the terrible things that are going to happen to the climate and agriculture in North America. But so it ties in together, right? He's obviously a man who thinks, and he's thought very much about these issues that face us. So here we go. How do we know that we're doing this thing called critical thinking or creative thinking or information-driven thinking or proper thinking? Well, just some things to ask ourselves about when we're confronted with a situation where we're asked to do resource management or make resource management decisions. So do you understand the logical connection between ideas? So in other words, as you're thinking about planning on a landscape, do you recognize that some of the things going on as far as what's going on in the landscape and the ideas associated with that are connected? Can you identify, construct, and evaluate arguments based upon the ideas that you're able to collect? Can you detect inconsistencies and common mistakes in reasoning? And so this is a real, I think it's a real issue for our society. Just identifying what are called logical fallacies, and logical we're not going to talk about logical fallacies. There's many of them, dozens and dozens of ways to where logic or reasonable thinking breaks down, and we hear it all the time in the media. We're bombarded with arguments that are false. One was brought up this morning in the previous session, where appeal to a higher authority, which is one that we see. We're all NRCS, right? Where within our agency, there's an appeal to a higher authority. Simply, this is what it says. Now, right, we're bound by policy, but I'm talking about from a technical perspective. From a technical, scientific perspective, appeal to a higher authority is a logical fallacy. You ought to have some defense of your position that's more than just, well, because I say so. Right? So are there inconsistencies or mistakes in reasoning? Do you solve problems systematically? In other words, does one conclusion that you come to lead to you being able to make another conclusion that's related to that, and you think your thinking's not completely scattered. And can you identify the relevance of important ideas? And a lot of ideas this week. I don't know if all of you have been confined to this, but I was wandering around in the convention center looking for where I was supposed to be this morning. And there are sessions going on over there. A lot of information being shared, right? A lot of ideas. What's relevant to your business? What's relevant to the situation that you're dealing with at a particular place in the world at a particular time? Not always easy to determine that, right? What really matters, or what can you take from what you know or what you've experienced and apply to a particular situation? And then the last one is, and we'll touch on this again, reflect on the justification for why you hold the views that you do, and why there are these general notions that are accepted out there as kind of always true in every situation. So what we're saying is that thinking critically or effectively is really thinking about why you're thinking what you're thinking. So it's very introspective, if you will. And now it's and again, for many of us it's we don't automatically do that. Some of us do that automatically. That's just the way we're wired, or our experience has taught us to do that. But the idea of commonly held notions, or our own beliefs and values. Now, I'm not here to challenge own beliefs and values. I have mine, and I hold them dearly, and they shape my life and the way that I view the world and the decisions that I make. But it's important to be aware of what those are. We all have them, right? And we're not saying you jettison those things, but it is important to think properly to recognize those things in our own lives. And oh, by the way, stop any time and just say something if you want to have something to say. This is much better as a conversation than me rambling on about all this stuff. So, thinking clearly. How do we do it? So here is I think it's a 5-step process or 6-step process. I usually don't like multi-step processes that imply that if you do this, therefore by the end you've succeeded. That's kind of what I'm going to do. So stick with me, and then please challenge any of these that you will. But here is a process that if applied with discipline over time might allow us to become better, critical, coherent thinkers. So identify the problem. So what's the root issue I have? Very often when we're dealing with something, it's not obvious what the root issue is. And what I mean by the root is the foundational thing that's causing maybe the thing that we're observing. It's not always the outcome that's the problem. The outcome may be a symptom of the root problem. So this is really critical for problem solving, for thinking rightly about issues, because if we don't identify the problem, then the solution we're going to come up with is probably going to be invalid or not worth much, right? Yeah. There you go. Yeah. It's like I used to be a weed science person, and it's like, okay, and you need to know your enemy, right? If you're dealing with weeds, you need to know what it is, right? So information is important. So how can I use both internal and external sources to help me deal with the problem that I've correctly identified? Internal meaning, okay, my knowledge and experience, things that I've done in the past, similar situations that I've seen, and then external. Maybe you have expertise that I don't. Maybe you have experience that I don't. You've seen something similar before. External also being this vast amount of scientific literature that we have out there that we were exposed, or you were exposed to some this week. Lots of data, right? Lots of data about what's projected to happen with precipitation and temperature as climate changes and variability in that. So know where to go to get that information. And then being able to evaluate the information. Are the viewpoints I'm using valid for the situation? So just because, for example, use an example from my world, cover cropping. Cover cropping is a real popular annual cropland practice in places like Iowa and Illinois and Minnesota. If you move west as precipitation decreases and you get to eastern Colorado, well, cover cropping is not such a good idea maybe there because there's seasonal fallow that's used in order so that you can grow 2 crops in 3 years or 1 crop in 2 years. So they have to store water in the soil and can't have water used by a crop that's not going to provide any income. So is the knowledge that I'm using to address my problem appropriate for the situation? And then what are the alternatives? So what are the reasonable possibilities? So not just what are all the possibilities, but I want to sort through that and say, okay, what's reasonable for my situation based upon the information that I've gathered, my own experience, how I'm thinking about this, what are the reasonable solutions, possible solutions, and then finally, if I do the 4 first things, it's a great philosophical exercise, and I've exercised my brain, and well, it's worthwhile for me. But as managers, we eventually have to make a decision, or even as spouses, we eventually have to make a decision, or friends, we have to make decisions based upon the information that we have. Even if it's a decision to how I'm going to respond to ISIS, right? Even though ISIS is a long way from here, we think, how do I respond to that based upon the information that I have? So we have to come to a place where we choose to respond and implement the best alternative. So all good NRCSers like you are, does this remind you of anything? Yeah, CC. There you go, the 9-step process, right? Condensed to 5 steps, and we just have maybe some on the end where you go back and see if what you did was any good. Yeah. For example, if you're going to say, well, I need to know what research has shown about this, right? That's where you go to this thing called Google Scholar. This is what I do, right? I go to Google Scholar, which pulls up scientific papers and books and chapters and stuff like that. And then I just start playing around with search terms, right? And if I put in a search term and I get 20,000 hits, well, that's too many, right? And then so I add a few more words. And there's really no, there's no magic way to do that, right? And then find things that you can actually read and understand, right? That's important because some things you could maybe not read and some things you can read and not understand. Those aren't helpful. So find things you can read and understand that maybe have something to say about your situation. But again, when I'm doing that, right, I've got to say, does this mean anything to me? Well, it's great information, right? But for my place in the world, this has absolutely no application, or any application that I can see anyway. So this is not easy, right? The point of this is, and I have a slide where we'll talk more about that, but it's not easy. It's challenging to do these things. But I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, I mean, there's a library worth of information out there. I have a lot of books that I want to read in my lifetime, and I'm running out of time. And I'm not a real fast reader. I'm in the world of slow readers. And so I get overwhelmed sometimes thinking about it, right? But we do what we can based upon what we have available to us. So it's the same with the stuff that's out there. And you can compile things, because once if we're talking about landscape management or resource management, once we compile information, file those things. Keep them somewhere where they're accessible again, where you can remind yourself and go back and say, oh, what did that say? Yeah, here, it might have some application for this situation. Yes? Sure. You bet. You bet. There's a lot of noise, right? A lot of noise. I get bombarded every day by noise. I've determined not to watch the network evening news anymore. It's all noise, right? That's all it is noise. 20 or 30 seconds at a time, or maybe a minute at a time. It's just too much. So yes, so filter those things out. Filter out the noise and do whatever you have to do that. Go to reputable sources. If you know of someone working in a particular area that's reputable, right? And university sources. But you're right, yeah. So it may not be relevant, or it may not be reliable either, right? Good point. So there are some obstacles to doing these things, those 5 steps, right? And we have them. We have a room full of them represented here to be able to think in such a way. We deal with complex problems as range management people. You do as range management people. We're talking resource managers. I do dealing with cropping systems and agronomy. These are biological systems. They're very complex. High number of variables. Variables change as you move from one part of a region to another part of a region if climate changes. Crops change, livestock species change. So a lot of variability. So these are complex systems. Then we have the human aspect, right? The economic aspects of the things that we're doing. Changing climates. So it needs to be said up front that what we're dealing with are complex systems. And so that's a challenge for us because our tendency is to want to simplify all the things we're challenged by. Right? Just to simplify issues. We're confronted by problems in the world. You know, our solution is just to simplify an answer, come up with a simple answer. You know, why is the high school dropout rate so high in certain parts of the country? Well, I can come up with an answer to that, but it's a complex system. It's a social problem. It's an educational problem. It's an economic, you know. So they're very complex, complicated problems that we often deal with, but our tendency is to simplify them. Why? Because we don't want to do the work of thinking about, well, maybe I don't know the clear answer. What I find is that I interact with people and talk about things, whether they're world affairs or agronomic things. The tendency for us is to oversimplify very complex issues. Most things that we deal with relationally and environmentally are very complex. False assumptions. Those would be my assumptions that are not correct based upon inadequate or insufficient data, wrong conclusions that I've made, or false assumptions on the part of the environment that I'm functioning in. NRCS. I'm an NRCS employee, and so I have to operate within the scope of NRCS as an agronomist. Are there, and again, I'm talking technically, scientifically now, are there assumptions that have been made, that have been passed down to me, that I operate within the context of that may not be so, may not be valid? Yes, just if you're wondering. There are, okay? There are, and I encounter them fairly regularly. And so you encounter them fairly regularly as well. And if you're not aware of them, then maybe that's an indication you're not thinking very strongly or critically about the problem that you're dealing with. Because our agency, by virtue of being a federal government agency, is a lot of assumption built into what we do. And some of that has to be there for efficiency purposes. Right? We have to assume some results as outcomes of our operations. So we assume we implement a practice, we get this result. Do we ever go back and do water quality measurements? Very, very infrequently, right? So we assume that implementing this practice will result in this outcome. But just be aware of that, right? So that's all we're saying is have an awareness of those things. Yeah. Yes. And then these false conclusions become fact. Oh yeah, well, right, but because once I draw the conclusion, I may be reluctant to back off from that, right? Right. So I mean, surely I thought properly and came to this decision, but did I necessarily? Right. I don't know. I need to be willing to think about that. The need to sort through conflicting information. I think this was kind of alluding to your comment earlier, right, is not all information is equally reliable. and much information is conflicting on the same issue. Apparently equally scientifically valid. And what if my experience conflicts research findings? Maybe there's data out there, a wealth of data, and it's contradictory to my own personal experience and the experience of the people that I'm working with. What do I do with that? You know, the great thing about my presentation is I don't provide any answers, okay? So I just raise all these issues. I'm not like, you know, information driven, just a lot of asking the questions. You provide the answers, yeah. That's a great example, yeah. Great example, yeah, great example. Yeah, you know, our agency is if people don't know us, for anything else, they know that we've done this thing called soil surveys, right? And so people think, and we tend to think, well, the soil survey is authoritative. Well, don't necessarily believe that. Right? I've dug plenty of holes on landscapes where using the survey it doesn't jihad, right? So don't, yeah. That's okay. So anybody have a bias in here? Prejudice? Yeah, you all do. Okay, let me help you. Okay, you've all come to this week to this room carrying your biases with you, and they are there in your head right now. I have mine, you have yours. Okay, so those are obstacles to clear thinking. Now, I haven't come to try to change or challenge your biases. That's not what I'm here for. But I think it's absolutely important that you recognize that you have them and you recognize what they are. That's all I'm saying, is embrace your biases, right? Know what they are. Because then you can, as you're facing a situation and you're trying to think your way through an issue, you're aware that, hey, I have this preconceived notion, right, that's there, that's influencing the way that I think about it. Yeah, sure, you challenge them, but I mean, I have biases that are built upon well-founded conclusions in my mind, right? I've wrestled through these for a number of years, and I've come to this place where I'm okay with them, right? And so, but I need to recognize that anytime I come into a conversation, even, that they are there, and I shouldn't, you know, I shouldn't put my biases or my prejudices or my presuppositions onto you, right? So I'm not. So yeah. So in some way, I guess I'm challenging them, right? Challenging them based upon the information that's coming in that may be contrary to my bias. And I have to be willing to do that. Lazy. It's hard work. It's hard work to think. And so many of us don't do it because it's easier just to take the simple approach and say, this problem's simple, therefore the answer is simple, and go on our way. My personality. Not my personality particularly, but you know, maybe my personality. Because I again remember that we want to come to the place where we make a decision based upon our thinking. Those of us that are more introverted may have a harder time doing this, right? Because we're easily influenced by other people. That's one of my downfalls. Is I'm very easily, you know, I'll have a position and I'll hear somebody say something a little bit contrary to that, and I'll go, golly, yeah, maybe that's right. You know, maybe I've been wrong about that. So that's a personality thing in me. But again, just to be aware of that's what we might tend to do. Again, we have to make a decision as a result of this. No one wants to fail. We all want to be successful in the things that we do. And so that can inhibit us from thinking clearly, again, and just going with whatever the easiest approach is. And we don't practice this. A lot of us don't do it. We don't go through the mental exercise and the rigor of thinking hard about issues. And then this thing. It takes time to do this. And so it takes time maybe to back off from the situation, allow yourself to ruminate about it, and then put all these information like we talked about together, look at the evidence, and then draw a conclusion. And sometimes, often we don't have time to do that. We're forced to make decisions, probably prematurely in some cases. But again, if it's a situation where long-term consequences result from the decisions we make, it's probably worthwhile to back away and take whatever time is necessary to work your way through the mental exercise of determining, yes, with the information I have, the best I can tell, this is the best position to take. So think of a social issue, everybody. Think of a social issue right now, right? Gay marriage, abortion. I mean, think of a. So, who are you most comfortable spending extended periods of time with? People who have diametrically opposing views on those issues as you do, or people that have the same views as you? We're comfortable, I think, just about all of us are most comfortable with people that think like we do, right? They see the world similarly to what we do. But again, you know, what we're saying is to think critically or clearly. Our thinking needs to be challenged. We need to think about why we're thinking the way that we're thinking. And so yeah, good point. Okay, we all have presuppositions that affect our thinking. Do you agree with that statement? What are you thinking? What are you thinking? You're thinking something, right? When you look at our president, you're thinking something. I don't know what it is. So just based upon the image, and in all fairness, some of you are thinking something maybe different or maybe the same with that image. So again, there are these inputs that we have, right, based upon observation and things that we have these notions so that everything I think about these particular individuals, I don't know either one of them, never met them, don't know them, but based upon my perception, I'm going to think certain things that I think come from their mouths or what their motives are, and again, that's based upon my bias, my prejudice. So just zero in a little bit on something that can influence the way that we think, and it's this thing called correlation. Yeah, so be careful of eating chicken. So this thing called correlation, and science is filled with correlation. Our news stories are filled with correlation. You hear the results of research reports all the time that claim correlation between at least two variables. Right? And all correlation means is that as one variable changes, a corresponding at least one or maybe more than one variable changes in relation to it. It could change positively or negatively, but there is some relationship inherent in these two variables, or it could be more than two variables that we're thinking about. So, yeah, not everyone eating chicken doesn't make you go to the moon, y'all. Right? Okay, so that's the point, that there's a correlation, but it's not an accurate conclusion based upon a correlation. So I bet you didn't know that because per capita consumption of margarine has decreased over this 10-year period, that it influenced the divorce rate in Maine correspondingly. And it's a strong correlation. You can't read this, but it says 99%. In science, if we get a 90% correlation in science, we say, eureka, right? These things are related. One that you didn't know about. Yeah. And along with eating less margarine, right, because we know that animal fat is better than vegetable fat. We've learned that over the past few years. We're eating more cheese, okay? But as a result of that, more people are dying getting tangled in bed sheets. So, I mean, there are consequences to these things that we do and we enjoy. So, Chuck. Yeah. No, I don't have this much time. But there is a guy. It's a cool website. I'll show you. I have one more. Just I wanted to make my point, and I was having fun adding these things. I had to stop eventually. Okay, so what's the old saying that you get in statistics class? And correlation is not what? Causation, right? But the information that we're getting very often, the implication is that yes, because these things are correlated, one in fact caused the effect that you see in the other one. So not all correlations are positive. There are some negative ones, like this. The number of bee colonies correlated to the number of juveniles convicted for marijuana possession. Okay? So in this case, how do you increase the number of bee colonies? You increase the number of individuals convicted for marijuana, or decrease the number of juveniles convicted for marijuana possession. Right? And that's a negative 93% correlation. So yeah, to make the point, right? Be aware, right? Be aware. There are correlations that are valid, right? Nitrogen levels in the soil relate to plant biomass production, right? That's true, right? As nitrogen increases in the soil, typically plant biomass production increases. Is that always true? Not necessarily, right? Why is that? Because there's lots of other things going on, right, out there in the real world. Precipitation, pest pressure, right? Lots of things happening in the world. So, thinking through challenging issues. So here's my one range. This is not a range talk. I think you got that by now. Here's my one range example, okay? Holistic management. How many holistic management fans? No, I'm kidding. I'm just kidding. I didn't want to divide the room. So high-intensity rotational stocking of rangelands is the answer to rangeland management, right? High-intensity rotational stocking. But wait a minute. High-intensity rotational stocking of rangelands is not the answer, according to Dr. Brisky et al. And a bunch of folks at Texas A&M. Well, the thing is, you know, David Brisky's at Texas A&M, and so is Richard Teague. They're just not in the same place. Brisky's in College Station, Teague's in Vernon. Both pretty reputable guys, right? So how do you sort your way through all that? And again, I'm not providing any answers. I'm just raising the issues. So what do you do with that? How do you think through this thing called holistic management? I'm an agronomist, right? And I still get confronted from time to time with holistic management concepts and people. And I can't get away from it, right? It's there. So we need to think through those things and how we deal with that. You may have heard since you've been in California that it's dry here. I mean, it's really dry. So these photos are from the San Joaquin Valley, which is the southern part of the Central Valley. And farmers down there are an independent sort, and they put up signs like this that say Congress created Dust Bowl. They're not talking about the Midwest Dust Bowl. They're talking about the Dust Bowl in the San Joaquin Valley. And so they blame the lack of water on Congress and the government and those sorts of things. And they put up signs that say food grows where water flows. That's true. That's true. So it's really bad. And I won't give you the details about how bad it is. It's bad. I was at a conference this week where there were a bunch of water expert people talking about how bad it is in California. And I left the two-day conference just completely depressed, right? And then I come and I hear Dr. Justin, and I mean it's bad, right? I mean I don't know where to move. I was joking with Cece a few weeks ago. I said I'm going to move out of California. I'm going to sell my house while I still can, right? But where are you going to move? So it's bad in California. We don't have water, but we do have almonds. So what's the relationship between the two? I'll show you on the next slide. So what I wanted you to see is what's happened to almond production. Here's 2002, here's 2014. 12 years. We've almost doubled the the almond acres in California. All in the Central Valley. All of them in the Central Valley. Most of them in the San Joaquin Valley, southern part of the Central Valley. Trail mix consumption. Yeah, the almond board has done an incredible job, kind of like the Angus beef people, right, in selling their product. They cannot meet market demand for almonds in the world. They cannot. Almond board says that by next year there'll be 1 million acres of almonds in California. It's absolutely incredible. Okay, so thinking through challenging issues again. How do we think about these things? Well, why are people growing almonds? Average California yield in 2012 was 2,400 pounds per acre. In the San Joaquin Valley, where most of them grown, 4,000 pounds per acre is not uncommon, pretty common. So the price that year was almost $2.60 a pound. So that's just the meat, the kernel, the almond itself. So if you have 4,000 pounds times 260, $9,000, something like that, an acre. Pretty good compared to corn or some of the other things you could grow. Pretty good. So the motivation, I guess I put that up. This is the motivation. Why almond acres have almost doubled in California in 12 years. Okay, here's part of the story that's a little harder to deal with, but we have to think about these things, right? They use about 4 feet of water a year. And we do this thing that we're playing with now called deficit irrigation, where we're trying to cut that back, only provide water during critical times of the tree and the nut growth. Depending on where you are, tomatoes use half that, another popular crop in the San Joaquin Valley, processing tomatoes. A lot of water. Remember I showed, we don't have water. We have, I heard this week that there are places in the San Joaquin Valley that just in 2014, subsidence due to groundwater withdrawal has exceeded 1 foot in 1 year. Okay? That's a lot of land sinking in a short period of time due to pumping groundwater. Our aquifers in the Central Valley are not designed to support intensive agriculture, 4 feet of water per acre particularly. I'm just telling you this is the way it is, right? I'm not saying good, bad, or other. So it only rains in the winter here when it does rain. And where they grow almonds, they might only get 5 inches of rain. So none of it falls in the growing season of the tree, essentially. Maybe early on, right? The trees will start growing pretty soon here in the next couple weeks. So we need 4 feet of water. We need it in the time of year where it doesn't rain, and it only rains 5 inches anyway. So these are some challenging things, right? Do landowners, this is America, y'all. Do landowners have a right to grow what they want on their property? Do farmers have a right to grow what they want on their property? They do, right? I mean, essentially, that's what we've said. They have a right. I mean, as long as it doesn't cause harm to their neighbors. I mean, they can't grow marijuana unless you're in Colorado or Washington, I guess. But they do have a right to grow what they want on their property. And so what's happening is most of the new almond acres, and I saw a lot of just planted trees coming back from Fresno this week. Just planted trees is converted rangeland. It's land that wasn't in production. So how much precipitation does rangeland need? See, how much does it need? How much it gets, right? However much it gets. If it gets 5 inches, that range kind of functions on 5 inches, and you adjust your management accordingly. But now we have a crop that needs 4 feet. So challenging, right? So what do we do? How do we think about these things, right? In light of the fact that people can grow what they want, and yet we're facing, and the way it sounds, increasing shortages of water, higher temperatures. So any of you deal with biochar or compost or cows saving the planet? How many of you read Cows Save the Planet? Come on. I want to read this one. I heard about this one the other day at another meeting I was. Grass Soil Hope by a guy named Courtney something or other. He used to be in the Sierra Club, but he got tired of being confrontational. And so he's supposedly an a fair-handed kind of guy. But so storing carbon in soils. to address global warming, right? And to help anybody, California people know about the Marin Carbon Project over in Marin County. And what they did is they're taking compost. I found all kind of cool stuff in the last weeks. In 2014, the state of California, by mandate of the state, processed 19 million tons of feedstock into compost. So California has this thing where they've legislated it that said that people that take trash have to compost the organic portion of that trash. So 19 million tons last year. They want to triple that capacity in 5 years. So we're going to have 60 million tons in whatever amount of compost that translates to. So there are these folks with the Marin Carbon Project that say, let's put it on rangeland. They did that, right? They spread it on rangeland, didn't they? And what happened? Good things, right? Don't laugh. Good things. Improved plant growth. More carbon in the. They're working with a professor at Berkeley. This is, more carbon in the soil, better infiltration, better water holding capacity, better plant productivity. So is that the answer, right? To make compost and spread it on rangelands. Don't answer that. Right? But those are things that we need to think about. Right? Do we compost our garbage and spread it out there? Maybe that's a climate change remediation technique. The folks in the Carbon Project would tell you that. They say that rangeland livestock people should become carbon farmers, right? I don't know, maybe. Okay, so where do I start? How do I, if I'm not comfortable with doing this, not in a habit of doing this? So I think it's good to just confess up front that most of us need to learn how to do this. It's a discipline. Like most disciplines in our lives, whatever it is, dieting or exercise, right, are common ones, it's something we have to acquire, something we have to get in the habit of doing. So this is no different. It's hard, and so it's an acquired discipline. Most of us don't do a very good job, that first one. Maybe we probably don't do a real good job with the other one too, because again, we come, when I'm having a conversation with you, right, and maybe we don't agree. Oh, if we agree, it's okay, right? But even if we agree, I'm already thinking about what I'm going to say in response to what you're saying. I'm not really listening. I'm not really thinking, so what point are they making? What information here could be useful to the situation? I'm already saying, well, you just don't get it, dude. Let me help you understand. So listen, observe, use your senses. Just be quiet. Shh. Shh. Just tell my children, shh. Calm down. Recognize your own biases. Absolutely essential, I think. Absolutely essential. We have them, right? Recognize what they are. And it's okay. But know that they're there, and then think about how they influence the way that you think about all the situations that you hear about. The things that you'll hear on the news today, the things that you heard about this week, your biases influence that. And then get outside input, right? So get in groups, share information, get outside input from inanimate sources, dead people that wrote things 50 years ago. Might be valuable. And then obviously talk with colleagues, different disciplines. Be sure of your facts and the application of them. So again, verify as best you can that your facts are true and that you're applying them appropriately to your situation. And then you have to make a decision and go with it, right? You just have to pick a pony. And all the other pretty ones and stuff, you just have to ignore them. And just have to get on that one, or else you'll never get anywhere. And then, I think not listening and not being very humble are probably related. I don't know, probably. Yeah. We don't do real good. Ego, right? Ego, big deal. Ego is always there. So are you willing to change your mind when confronted with facts and a reasonable argument, or the situation as you observe it, and the best you can gather, that maybe a long-held position needs to be modified. Are you woman enough, man enough to say, you know, I might have been wrong. No, I was wrong about that, right? I was wrong about that. Or you could, you know, take the coward's way out and say, well, I obviously did not have adequate information to make an informed decision, and so, but be willing to do that, right? Because that's the whole point of this. We don't come with complete information. None of us do. And so, you know, if everything's set, then what good are we doing, right? Facing some of these challenges that we have. And what good are you, or what good am I, if we're self-contained units and have all the information? And then it's a challenge, but enjoy it, right? Make the most of it. You know, for your sake, as the person who's going through the exercise, to learn to be thoughtful in all the parts of your life, and then for the sake of the person that you're working with, the client or the landowner or whoever it might be. Enjoy the challenge of going through that. And that's all I have to say.